Okay, so welcome to the session. We have Nick Davies here as the speaker. This is a multilingual conference in Microsoft Teams using Speechly in a Jabra device. And I think I recognise the Jabra device sitting on top of the lectern there. So I'm going to hand you over to Nick, who's the Chief Commercial Officer at FITS, to go with the session. Hopefully I got all that right.
You did, thank you.
Perfect. Over to you, Nick.
What a mouthful that all was as well. So I appreciate the introduction. Good afternoon, everyone. And I appreciate this is the afternoon shift and we've all just had lunch as well. So I'll try and keep it engaging and as informative as I can. Now, you might have seen the original agenda. My colleague, James Howarth, should have been here instead of myself. Unfortunately, he's had a bit of a medical emergency, so I was a last-minute step in. But it all should still be all good. Should still be able to tell you about how we can use Speechly to give you the ability to talk to people in other languages over Teams and in person. And that's really my principal objective today. So what I'm going to try and do, though, is give you a little bit of, I suppose, market context, a bit of background as to why Speechly is being to start off with. I'll show you Speechly, talk about the different modules of Speechly, how they can benefit different use cases. I'll have a couple of videos to show you as well in terms of how Speechly is used over the Teams environment, and I'm going to also do an additional live demonstration of Speechly in the room using the Jabra device. So that big mouthful of a title and introduction earlier, I'm going to make sure we hit all those objectives there. But as we are such a small audience, please don't stand unnecessarily. If there are any questions, please put your hands up or shout out. Just don't heckle, don't throw tomatoes or cans, and I'll be fine. If we take a step back, though, as to what's the reason for being for Speechly, probably it's pure common sense, but the reality is we've seen a drive to globalization over the last few generations, and we've always taken typically British view of life that most people speak English. Let's be really open and honest about it. But the reality is that globalization has driven migration, it's driven immigration, it's driven a number of challenges in different societies, but what it's really created is language has now become a barrier. And it's become a barrier to a number of things. It's become a barrier to commerce. It's also become a barrier to access to healthcare. It's become a barrier and created social divide. And if we kind of take a look back, and believe me, I'm not going to get political in any way, shape or form, but the post-Brexit economy, most organisations in the UK are being asked to refocus their exports outside of Europe. They're being asked to look at the BRIC or APAC regions and countries. Those new export territories that we're looking to try and enhance, language will become a barrier to those organisations trying to establish their trade. If we do look at UK businesses, about 70% of those UK businesses don't have any language provision, so immediately they're going to be handicapped. That's a cost to our economy of £46 billion per annum in terms of the inability to have a conversation, as it were, and export properly and effectively overseas. But if we also look at then the immigration back into the UK, and yes, of course, I'm being focused on the UK, but these problems aren't just UK specific. These challenges and problems are happening in all Western and other developed economies. But if we look at immigration back into the UK, and you look at, there's a legal obligation to provide language services in the public sector, whether it's access to healthcare, whether it's access to the job centre, whether it's the taxman, whether it's policing or otherwise. And that creates a problem, that creates a challenge. So how do we look to solve that?
We live in a connected world, a world in which we need to communicate with people globally, even if we don't speak their language. Say hello to Speechly, a real-time interpretation app that works exclusively with compatible Jabra audio devices and leading unified communication platforms. With Speechly, you can hold real-time conversations in multiple languages with instant audio interpretation and transcription, all controlled from a simple-to-use app. Interpret conversations face-to-face, on the phone, or through your preferred collaboration platform. The Speechly app makes interpreting efficient and cost-effective. Quickly access the Speechly app on your preferred Android mobile device or desktop. Your conversations are transcribed in real time and recorded for future use, so you can easily find and export your conversations later using the quick search function on the menu. And with the embedded management portal providing insights, you have full control of your Speechly usage, data storage, and user licensing from a single window. It's time to break down language barriers, make interpretation cost-effective, and communicate more spontaneously with your audience. Speak their language with Speechly and Jabra.
So that's Speechly, and this is the first and only time I'm going to say this, because again, we'll try and keep away from having large phrases that are a mouthful, but Speechly is an enterprise interpretation automation solution. And we'll get onto what makes it enterprise in a short while, because on the face of it, there are a number of different translation interpretation apps that are out there, but they're very consumer centric, whether it's Google Translate or whether it's Apple. Okay, but there's a fundamental difference between what's required at consumer level and what's required in a commercial organization. Today, Speechly delivers interpretation over 46 different languages. We added 11 new languages in the last couple of weeks itself. We cover all the major languages that are required for most of the countries we mentioned earlier on, and most of the diversity we have in the UK itself. As long as the app sits on a device that has access to the internet, we can hear the audio coming in, we can provide the interpretation. The reason, however, that it's an enterprise delivered app, first and foremost, is making sure we've got the compliance and security. Because ultimately we are recording data, we are recording conversations, whether it's a use case in a GP surgery or whether it's a global commercial estate agency that are communicating with their partners in a different overseas territory. So we've got to make sure that the data that we're recording is secure. But secondly, it's also got to be searchable. We need to ensure we've got the appropriate e-discovery, we've got the appropriate ability to integrate with systems of record, whether it's a CRM or an ERP system or solution. And of course, we need to make sure we've got the appropriate management capability and understand what is the usage, what are the languages, can we have the appropriate administration of the users in the organisation. And that fundamentally sets it apart from the consumer grade services that you've got. There's a number of different modules. Now, of course, we're on a Teams conference here, so we ought to really focus on the ability to deliver Speechly over unified communication platforms such as Teams itself, but it does have a number of different modules that actually builds out its capability. So in-person translation, that's part what I can demonstrate in live in a short while. The ability for two people in the same room to have a conversation with each other in two different languages, and a near normal conversation at that. Bless you. Then we've got Speechly for Touch, and the Speechly Touch is really aimed at an appliance or an EPOS type solution, whether it's a front of house or whether it's a Teams meeting room type device. So you have the ability to use shared devices but instantly access the capability for, again, video conference or in person. The ability to do one-to-many. So again, whether you're presenting to a sales team that happen to be, and you're doing your quarterly update, it happen to be your French sales team or your German sales team or otherwise. So it's one person broadcasting out to an audience, but I'm able to speak in my native language whilst they're able to hear and receive in their native language. And of course, the conference. Right here, right now, the ability to have a person-to-person conversation over Teams. I'm speaking English, you're speaking German, but we can have that near normal conversation using an existing unified communication technology. An app. Right here, right now, is available on Android. So again, we can have that in-person conversation on an Android app. And if you start thinking about kinds of use cases where you might have that, it might be tourist, it also might be healthcare, it might be first response. If somebody has an accident on the side of the road, the policeman's the first person there, the person doesn't speak native English. Great, how do we find out what's happened? How do we communicate with that person? How do we reassure them? That's fine. The app gives you the ability to do that. But the fact that it's enterprise grade means that the whole conversation is recorded. We've got the transcript, we've got the original audio that we can have access to at any other given time, and that can then be used for further documentation. Right, I should pause that just for a second. So what you're going to see right now, two of my colleagues, this is a Teams recording from earlier on, and there's two of my colleagues. One of them's going to be speaking in Spanish, and the other one's going to be speaking English. And this will show you how the conversation builds over time. So I just carry on clicking play on there. I'll let that play through. I have clicked play. Thank you. Thank you, Liv.
Good afternoon, Brendan. It's nice to meet you.
So immediately what you're seeing are the speech bubbles forming. So that gives you the on-the-fly.
Hi,
quality
Dr.
assurance.
Perez. Thank you for agreeing to see me online.
No problem. I've been told that you are having slight pain in your chest.
So you're getting the transcript of the original spoken audio in English for user A. And user B,
Yes, when I breathe, I feel a slight pain on my right side.
you're getting the original
Does this happen
transcripted
every
audio
time you
in
breathe
Spanish as well, and then the interpretation underneath. Absolutely. Yeah. So what you're doing, you're hearing the interpretation. So we have the choice of hearing the original source audio and
Only
then
when
the
I take a
interpretation,
deep breath.
or just the interpretation.
I see. I'm afraid I'm going to have to book you in for an X-ray at the surgery today or tomorrow. Does that work for you?
I'll just pause that there for a second. So what you're seeing, or what you should have been seeing, particularly on the longer sentences, is choosing, is trying to predict actually what's this person going to be saying. But it doesn't actually finish the translation until they've finished speaking, because it's a contextual translation. It's not a literal translation, so it's not word for word for word. So it's trying to think, okay, you've said this so far, what are you going to say next? Okay, that's everything you said. Then it does the interpretation, and then it plays out the audio. So that's why there's a slight delay when user B, which was my colleague Brendan, so he's speaking in Spanish. So just while he's speaking that long sentence, okay, then it's done interpretation, so you get the slight gap, and then the interpretation then gets played out. Now this whole transcript is then saved. It's not editable once it's saved. You can't amend it, you can't change it. You can then export it, and you can either have an export into a system of record, or you can export it to any one of the Microsoft outputs, Word or PDF or otherwise. Once you've exported, yes, of course, you can edit it, or you can do a straight copy and paste. But the reason we make sure it's not editable, so it's then secure and then can be used and admissible alongside the audio of the conversation itself. That should finish and play through. Yeah. So I'm clicking on it. So that's speechly delivered over Teams. So it gives you that ability to, like I say, have that near normal. Oh, we were still speaking.
Yes, tomorrow would be better.
What you also get is the beginnings of sentiment analysis as well. Now, I don't know why he's that cheery about the fact he's got a heart problem. I probably wouldn't be, to be fair. But it's particularly when you're not hearing the actual intonation of the voice of the person, what they're saying, because you're just hearing an interpretation. So it gives you a good indication. Are you sad? Are you happy? Are you angry? You know, it gets you much more of a feel for the conversation you're having with the other participant.
Okay, great. I'll see you at 9 a.m. then.
If only medical appointments are that quick, but you know, this was a stylized camp demonstration. Go for it. Absolutely right, yes. The answer is yes, and that's exactly what we do. So we build specific models for different sectors. So we've got a large number of NHS organisations at the moment, so we've already done that. We've imported a number of healthcare dictionaries, basically. Similarly, do the same with legal sector, you do the same with banking, finance, so you make sure you've got the right jargon. And it tends to be real pronouns, nouns, proper nouns, and acronyms tend to be the biggest challenge, because, you know, BRB might be right back for most of us in slang, but BRB in, I don't know, insurance world might mean something completely different. So yes, we can import that with a translation and push that to all the different languages that are there. As long as we've got the source, we can then translate it. Yeah, no problem. Now I'm just going to show you the in person, because that obviously that was a recording that we did earlier on. So I'm going to unplug the microphones in the room. This will stop working. And I will switch to Speechy in here. Here's where it gets dangerous, everybody, because this is a live demonstration using shared Wi-Fi. So what could possibly go wrong? So you'll see one of the things we've spoken about, or we touched on a short while ago. We lock Speechly to Jabra. There's a number of reasons that we do that right here, right now. And the first piece is that it makes sure that we can get clarity of the audio coming in. As long as we know the audio coming in is high quality, we understand the spoken word to begin with, the actual of translation or interpretation is relatively straightforward as long as we can hear the individual. And that's why we work closely with the Jabra guys. Having said that, I'm using a Speak 710, which doesn't have noise cancelling, but it's not very noisy in here. And I'm just trying to crane my head because I haven't got the screen. Right, there we go. So I'm going to do a single device. You speak French, don't you? Because you are French. I'm going to stick with French in that case. Would you like to participate in a live demonstration? Oh, that's not a big red buzzer to. If you don't mind coming down to, if that's okay.
You need me. I don't think so.
Yeah, that's fine. So we need it so you're next to the speaker. So I'm just going to ask you a couple of questions if you just don't mind responding.
In French.
Yeah, in French. And what you'll see there is the ability to tag the conversations as well. So that helps with trying to search particular conversations. Obviously, this is demos, it's Comsverse. That just helps with e-discovery and any other needs that we might have. So that should now be coming along. So good morning, how are you?
Bonjour, je vais très bien, merci.
Parce que c'est un bon matin, comment allez-vous? Méchant.
Je vais très bien, merci.
I'm doing very well, thank you.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much for not trying to slow down your voice.
C'est génial, merci beaucoup de ne pas essayer de faire entendre votre voix.
Okay.
De rien. De quoi allez-vous nous parler aujourd'hui?
Nouveau Bollywood.
Oh, right, I forgot to switch person two there. But you notice a deliberate mistake I made, and oh, it's gone. Hopefully you saw that we weren't trying to slow down our voices. We're trying to, well, my normal Lutonian mumbling, but it didn't quite understand me because I did mumble, but I had the opportunity to see that it misunderstood me. And actually, if I'd have read it right correctly, I would have repeated the question, so it would have got the question right. So as long as it hears you, understands you, okay, if it gets it wrong, then you can repeat the question, and you've got the security there. How was it going in terms of the interpretation from our side?
Yeah, it was good. That's
Yeah.
exactly the same.
And obviously, you can speak French much more quickly than I can speak English, and I think it picked you up for pretty well. Thank you very much for your help on
You're
that.
welcome.
Appreciate that. So that's speaking in person. The video, not too different, apart from the fact that obviously you saw the video earlier on. You just hear the interpretation that plays out. And then, of course, I've got the ability to then go in and have access to all the transactions, all the conversations that I've already had. If I pick on one of those there, that's probably the one we've just had. There's a transcript, unnoticeable. I've got access to the audio, and then I can export it. So I can do whatever I need to do with that thereafter. I've got to put this back in now. Go back to presentation. Any questions on Speechly there at all?
When you're in a session with Microsoft Teams,
Yeah.
switch between S1 and S2 here.
That's automatic. It's only the fact that we're using a shared device we had to switch. If you're in a team session, you don't need to because it identifies who the users are. Or even if we both had headsets on and we're in person, you don't need to switch either. It's literally just because we had the one device, so I had to switch between the two. All right, let's plug that back in.
Yeah.
Allez-vous nous parler aujourd'hui?
Does it include Punjabi?
Nouveau
I know
Bollywood.
it does Hindi, but just wondering.
Not yet, but it
Is
will
it
do.
on the
That is
list
the.
yet?
It is. That is the last of the major languages that we need to add.
Because it's quite
Yeah.
a common one as well.
Absolutely, yeah, and it's pretty prolific, obviously, but it's the only one we don't at the moment. Yeah, but very shortly. Any other questions, Phil?
Any other questions in the room? If you're in the remote audience, if you want to ask a question to Nick, just raise your hand in Teams and I can unmute you. So I think we've got Karen and Richard. If either of you have a question, just raise your hand and I can unmute you. Okay, Karen has. Let's see. Line. Okay. Okay, Karen, if you unmute, you should be able, hopefully, to speak in the room.
Yeah, thank you. Okay. My question is, I teach large classes, and increasingly I'm getting people from different countries. I've been using slides, PowerPoint slides, to simultaneously translate.
Mhm.
I can only do it in one language at a time. I would use normally a Jabra, sorry, not a Jabra mic, I would use a Yeti mic. Would it work with something like that?
I'm not sure what a Yeti mic is, to be honest with you, but just normal microphone.
like
Yeah, it will work, but it's similar to like Team certified devices. We speech certified devices all Jabra. So that's the only way you can guarantee the quality of audio normally coming in. But yeah, it would. Simply speaking, it work with most.
Most normal mic.
Yeah.
Great, thank you.
No problem.
Any other questions in the room, online audience? No, I think we're good, Nick.
Right. Well, I appreciate your time. Hopefully you've seen how to use Speechly in a Teams environment, also in person. There isn't much of the day left, but of course we are, if I can get onto the next slide, there we go. We are actually downstairs, so if you wanted to have more of a play yourselves with the touch version of Speechly, come on down to the booth, have a play, try and trip it up and see how we go. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much. We do. Oh, hold on. No doubt. Right.